Expanding high-quality career pathways and workforce development programs. During President Biden's term, more than $80 billion from the American Rescue Plan was committed to strengthening and expanding the American workforce, from supporting high-quality free community college programs in high-demand fields, to expanding registered apprenticeships, to attracting and retaining a skilled, diverse workforce in critical industries. President Biden made record investments in high-quality workforce development models. In addition to signing a registered apprenticeship executive order to bolster apprenticeships in the federal workforce, the administration secured more than $730 million for registered apprenticeships, the gold standard earn and learn pathway, leading to the hiring of more than 1 million apprentices. The administration supported industry-led sector partnerships such as the $500 million Good Jobs Challenge that bring together employers, unions, community colleges, and other partners to develop high-quality training programs. More than 1 million Americans started a registered apprenticeship after President Biden took office, including in new fields. For example, 46 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico now have K-12 teacher registered apprenticeship programs. No states had a teacher registered apprenticeship program when the administration took office. As First Lady Jill Biden announced in November 2024, 34 states and the District of Columbia now have a free community college program. In total, over 400 colleges, cities, and states offered tuition-free college and job training, up from about 50 programs when she, Obama, and then Vice President Biden launched the America's College Promise Initiative in 2015. More than 80 community colleges across 22 states have created or expanded programming to train semiconductor workers for advanced manufacturing jobs spurred by the President's CHIPS and Science Act. The administration invested $225 million through the Strengthening Community College Training Grants, enabling nearly 200 colleges in more than 30 states to provide affordable, high-quality workforce training for workers and address major workforce priorities for employers in their local communities. First Lady Jill Biden's leadership in rethinking the high school experience helped to drive the Biden-Harris administration's effort to better connect both high schools and post-secondary programs to career pathways, which included the Unlocking Career Success Initiative's $31 million investment in building model career-connected programs in high schools that would provide up to 120,000 students with pathways to high-wage, high-demand careers. As First Lady, Dr. Biden championed community colleges and workforce training programs, traveling the country to highlight evidence-based models and promising practices that connect high school and community college students to good-paying jobs. In 2023, First Lady Jill Biden announced 5 Investing in America workforce hubs in regions where the administration's Investing in America agenda is catalyzing historic public and private sector investments: Augusta, Baltimore, Columbus, Phoenix, and Pittsburgh. Since then, President Biden designated 4 additional workforce hubs in the state of Michigan, Milwaukee, upstate New York, and Philadelphia. In these workforce hubs, the administration has partnered with state and local officials, employers, unions, community colleges, K-12 schools, and other stakeholders to ensure these regions can meet the demand for labor driven by these investments. Equality and opportunity for all Americans. President Biden fought to ensure the promise of America for all individuals and communities across the country, including rural communities, communities of color, tribal communities, LGBTQ+ individuals, people with disabilities, women and girls, and communities impacted by persistent poverty. Racial equality, equal opportunity, and diversity. From day one, the Biden-Harris administration committed to restoring the soul of our nation and made significant progress to redress systemic barriers, reduce burdens, and close unjust gaps. President Biden signed 2 historic executive orders to advance racial equality and support for underserved communities through the federal government. To promote racial equality and protect equal opportunity, President Biden and Vice President Harris focused on increasing access to federal contracting dollars, capital, and lending programs for small disadvantaged businesses, reducing discrimination and approval bias in the housing market, tackling persistent poverty and building economic prosperity in rural communities, reconnecting communities left behind and divided by historic redlining, disinvestment, and inadequate transportation infrastructure, addressing health and healthcare disparities, including tackling the maternal health crisis and increasing access to treatment for rare and severe disease like sickle cell, rooting out educational inequities and preserving pathways to equal opportunity, ensuring all Americans can access the federal benefits they are entitled to, promoting fairness, transparency, and accountability in the justice system, countering discrimination and hate-fueled violence, bolstering proactive enforcement that protects the civil rights of all Americans. Black and Latino communities. Because of these efforts, the Biden-Harris administration made record progress, achieved the lowest Black unemployment rate on record and an historically low Latino unemployment rate, lifted 440,000 Black children and 360,000 Latino children out of poverty through increased SNAP benefits, and narrowed racial disparities in child poverty to a historic low during the COVID pandemic through the expanded child tax credit. Doubled Black business ownership and increased Latino business ownership by 40% since before the pandemic. Tripled the number of SBA-backed loans to Black-owned businesses and doubled the number of SBA-backed loans to Latino-owned businesses. Invested a record of more than $19 billion in historically Black colleges and universities, as well as nearly $16 billion in Hispanic-serving institutions. Took on racial bias in home appraisals, closed the racial home value misvaluation gap by 40%, and achieved the largest single-year increase in home ownership rates for Latinos. Reduced mortgage insurance premiums for FHA loans, saving more than 130,000 Black households and 185,000 Latino homeowners an average of $900 per year. Distributed $2.2 billion in financial assistance to over 43,000 farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners who previously experienced discrimination in loan programs. Increased Black families' wealth even after adjusting for inflation, 60% relative to pre-pandemic levels, the largest increase on record. To further affirm his commitment to racial justice, President Biden proudly signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, the first new federal holiday since the creation of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday over 40 years ago, to honor and preserve the significance of African American history as U.S. history. Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. President Biden and Vice President Harris prioritized the advancement of opportunity, equality, and safety for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. The Biden-Harris administration created nearly 2 million jobs for AA and NHPI workers and historic small business growth. Lifted 63,000 AA and NHPI individuals out of poverty by updating SNAP benefits. Cut Asian American child poverty by almost 25% during the COVID pandemic, thanks to the American Rescue Plan's expanded child tax credit in 2021, which lifted 56,000 Asian American children out of poverty. Delivered $5 billion in American Rescue Plan funds to AA and NHPI serving colleges and universities. Increased enrollment in Affordable Care Act coverage, which resulted in 1 million more AA and NHPI individuals having access to quality, affordable health care in 2024, a 22% increase since 2020. Built a federal government that looks like America by appointing a record number of AA and NHPI appointees, electing Vice President Kamala Harris, and swearing in 3 AA and NHPI members of the cabinet. Confirmed a record number of AA and NHPI federal judges, including the first Native Hawaiian federal judge. Reestablished and expanded the President's Advisory Commission and White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Signed the COVID Hate Crimes Act into law in 2021 and deployed resources to improve the reporting and prevention of hate crimes and strengthen community-based interventions. Recognize the cultural heritage of the indigenous peoples and communities of the Pacific Islands by renaming the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument as the Pacific Islands Heritage Marine National Monument. Became the first administration to formally honor the Hui Panal, Native Hawaiians sent to secure United States territorial claim to the islands in the run-up to World War II. Tribal nations and Native communities. President Biden and Vice President Harris worked tirelessly to cement their legacy as one of the most supportive administrations for tribes ever. Together, they championed tribal sovereignty, honored the federal trust responsibility, and strengthened nation-to-nation relationships. Through the Investing in America agenda, the Biden-Harris administration made record investments to support tribal nations and Native communities. President Biden signed an historic executive order to usher in the next era of tribal self-determination by making reforms to funding programs to be more in line with tribal decision-making. Issued an historic presidential apology for the federal Indian boarding school era and established the Carlisle Federal Indian Boarding School National Monument in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to tell the story of the oppression endured by thousands of Native children and their families at this site and others that the federal government operated across the country for more than 150 years. The Biden administration cut the Native American child poverty rate by over a third in 2021, bringing the gap between Native American and white child poverty rates to a record low, thanks largely to the American Rescue Plan's expansion of a child tax credit, which lifted nearly 90,000 Native American children out of poverty. Nearly doubled the total dollar amount of SBA-backed loans to Native American-owned small businesses, provided $118 million in funding to help fight the opioid epidemic in tribal communities, established the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Native Americans and Strengthening Tribal Colleges and Universities, estimated co-payments for Native American veterans receiving care from the Department of Veterans Affairs, signed 2 presidential memoranda directing federal agencies to submit plans of action to implement meaningful consultation with tribal nations and establishing uniform standards for tribal consultation. Made historic appointments of Native Americans across the administration, including Secretary Deb Haaland and over 80 Native Americans in senior administration roles. Made the largest direct federal investment in tribal nations ever of $32 billion through the American Rescue Plan. Invested $13 billion through the bipartisan infrastructure law to build high-speed internet, roads, bridges, public transit, clean water, and improved sanitation in tribal communities. Invested $700 million in Native American communities for climate resilience and adaptation programs, drought mitigation, home electrification, and clean energy development through the Inflation Reduction Act. Relaunched the Tribal Nations Summit and reestablished the White House Council on Native American Affairs that serves to foster an all-of-government approach to coordinating and developing tribal policy. signed an executive order to improve public safety and criminal justice and address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people by directing agencies to prioritize addressing this crisis and develop a coordinated and comprehensive federal law enforcement strategy. Signed a presidential memorandum to restore healthy and abundant native fish populations in the Columbia River, which supports cultural and spiritual practices, commerce, and economic growth for tribes. Strengthened gender-based violence protections for tribal communities and established the Not Invisible Act Commission. Protected and conserved lands and waters significant to tribes, including restoring protections for Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument and Bears Ears National Monument in Utah, establishing Avi Kwa Ame National Monument in Nevada, and Baj Nawajo Kukavini ancestral footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument in Arizona, designating the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary off the coast of California, expanding the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument in Northern California, and creating the Chuckwalla National Monument in the Satilla Highlands National Monument in California. Signed more than 400 co-stewardship or co-management agreements to allow tribal nations to collaborate with the federal government to manage the federal lands, waters, and resources that are most important to them. Released the first of its kind government-wide Indigenous knowledge guidance that assists federal agencies in recognizing and including Indigenous knowledge in federal research, policy, and decision-making. Next will be historic appointments to the judiciary.